Close your eyes for a moment and imagine waking in the brittle stillness of a medieval winter morning. Inside a hut built from rough, unfinished timber, where silence feels so fragile it might shatter with the slightest movement, and every gust of wind outside does not merely strike the walls but patiently searches for the smallest crack through which the cold can slowly, relentlessly slip inside. You are lying beneath a thin patchwork blanket stitched from scraps of worn cloth, your body pressed tightly against other bodies, because this is how people slept, not out of tenderness but out of necessity, out of simple physics, and even so you can see your own breath drifting upward in the faint glow of dying embers, like pale smoke with nowhere to go. Above you, the roof beams are dusted with delicate crystals of frost, an icy constellation formed from breath, smoke, and cold, and for a brief moment the thought crosses your mind that if you truly had to live this way, night after night, winter after winter, you might not survive it. Before you sink any deeper into this world, allow yourself to settle, to breathe slowly, and to let the night stretch out, because the place we are entering now is one without heaters, without soft mattresses, without true silence, yet filled with quiet strategies of endurance practiced for centuries. The hut you wake in bears little resemblance to what we would now call a home, its walls made from split logs roughly stacked together, their gaps packed with clay, straw, or even dried dung, not to make the space comfortable but simply to slow the advance of the wind. The thatched roof sags under the weight of snow, and the floor beneath you is nothing more than packed earth, scattered with straw that has grown damp where melted snow has crept inside. The air is thick and still, heavy with the sharp, lingering scent of smoke that never truly leaves, no matter how carefully the fire is tended. You shift slightly, half buried beneath the heap of bodies that serves as bedding, and a well-established historical fact comes to mind. Medieval families almost always slept together, parents, children, and sometimes servants, shoulder to shoulder, not because it was intimate, but because it was efficient. Heat was precious, and bodies were insulation. You feel the weight of a younger sibling curled against your legs, the warmth of your mother's back beside you, and above, near the rafters, the rasping cough of your father echoes softly through the timbered space. Even with all this shared warmth, the night has not been kind. You remember waking again and again as the cold crept across your toes despite layers of wool, the way stiffness settled into your limbs, the way sleep never fully held you. The blanket helps, but it is more memory than protection. A quilt of old garments carefully stitched together, heavy but imperfect, and when you pull it higher beneath your chin, the warmth gathers only briefly, like smoke trapped in cupped hands. There is something uncanny about these hours when night has not quite ended and morning has not yet begun. The embers paint the ceiling in dull red smears, while outside a rooster crows far too early, its call muffled by snow. Every sound inside the hut feels magnified, the creak of beams contracting in the cold, the soft rhythm of breathing, the quick scuttle of a mouse bold enough to search for crumbs. Historians still debate whether frost truly lingered inside these huts as constantly as we imagine, or whether steady fires kept the cold more at bay than romantic accounts suggest. But here, shivering beneath the quilt, the cold feels undeniably real. A curious detail drifts through your thoughts in some households. People rubbed animal fat or grease onto their faces before sleep, hoping it would protect their skin from cracking in the bitter air. The idea makes you grimace, imagining the smell mixing with hay and damp wool. Yet in winters like this, anything that promised relief would have seemed worthwhile. The door, little more than a wooden plank braced in place, rattles under another gust of wind, and for a moment your thoughts turn to wolves, ever present in stories if not always just beyond the clearing. Your father rises quietly, careful not to wake the others, and stirs the coals with a stick, muttering under his breath as he coaxes life back into the embers. A spark catches, smoke thickens, and a faint wave of relief spreads through the hut. The medieval day begins, not with light but with endurance, and you realize that night has not truly ended. It has merely shifted into another form. Sleep here is never seamless. It stretches, breaks, and weaves itself together with discomfort and half-dreams. You lie still, reluctant to move, feeling the ache in your limbs and the sharpness of the air biting at your face, knowing that beyond this fragile warmth waits another cold day. The hut creaks softly as the fire steadies, and in that sound you recognize the quiet truth of medieval survival. Each morning does not begin with comfort, but with the simple fact that you have endured the night. And it is here, in this fragile moment between darkness and dawn, between cold and embers, between sleep and waking, that the story truly begins. As the fire settles into a quieter glow, and the hut exhales the day's last movement, you become more aware of the weight of the clothes you are wearing, because in this world sleep does not mean undressing, and a well-established historical reality is that medieval people rarely removed their garments at night, especially in winter, since every layer was a barrier between flesh and frost. You lie there wrapped in a rough wool tunic that has been worn for days, perhaps weeks, a thinner linen layer beneath it already damp from breath and sweat, and over your shoulders a patched cloak that smells faintly of smoke and old rain, while your legs remain encased in thick hose that itch constantly but trap precious warmth, and even your feet are swaddled in cloth strips meant to serve as socks. Because bare skin here would invite pain, the fabric twists as you shift, bunching uncomfortably beneath you, and the itch of wool presses at your skin in a way that never fully disappears. Yet you remember your mother's quiet rule repeated each night without argument. That itching fades but cold does not, and so you tolerate it, as everyone does. Some people, you recall, went further still, stuffing straw or scraps of cloth into their tunics, turning their own bodies into crude insulation, a practice that sounds absurd until you imagine how it must have felt to trap even a little more warmth close to the chest when the wind screamed outside. Around you, each member of the family sleeps dressed in their own arrangement of survival, your father still wrapped in the same cloak he wears to the fields, its edges stiff with age and smoke, your mother layered in overlapping garments with a scarf drawn tight around her hair and ears, your siblings bundled like small parcels in hand-me-down wool and fur that no longer looks like fur at all, but still holds heat. The smell of these clothes fills the hut, a mix of smoke, damp wool and human closeness, and washing them in winter is nearly impossible, since water freezes quickly and drying fabric in the cold air can take days, so garments carry the memory of every hearth fire and every restless night. As your eyes adjust to the dimness, another presence makes itself known, one so ordinary in this world that it barely registers as unusual: the animals. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that in many medieval wooden huts, especially among poorer families, livestock shared the same living space as humans during winter nights, because animals were not only valuable property, but living sources of heat. Somewhere near the hearth, a pig shifts in its straw, releasing a low grunt as it resettles, its body radiating warmth like a slow-burning stove, while nearby a goat exhales softly, its breath visible in the ember light, and above, a chicken rustles its feathers on a beam, disturbed briefly by movement before settling again. The smell grows stronger now, earthy and unmistakable, blending with smoke and damp straw, until it becomes simply the smell of life inside these walls. And though modern sensibilities might recoil, here the calculation is simple: warmth matters more than comfort, and survival outweighs cleanliness. You remember stories of children pressing frozen feet against the side of a pig for relief, laughing quietly at the instant warmth, and while it sounds crude, it also sounds effective, and effectiveness is the only currency that matters on nights like this. Animals also bring reassurance, because they hear and smell things humans miss, and a restless animal can serve as an alarm long before danger reaches the door. Dogs bark, geese hiss, pigs squeal, and even now you listen for changes in their breathing, knowing instinctively that if they are calm, the night is likely safe. The hut feels less like a building and more like a shared organism, human and animal breath mixing, heat pooling in the center, all of you bound together by the simple need to endure until morning. You shift again, careful not to disturb anyone, and feel the uneven bedding beneath you, because there is no mattress here in the modern sense, only layers of straw, hay, or rushes spread over the packed earth. This crude pallet is scratchy, lumpy, and far from clean, yet it creates a thin barrier between your body and the frozen ground below, and even that small separation can mean the difference between tolerable discomfort and deep, aching cold that seeps into bones. Sometimes, when luck allowed, animal hides were added, deer or sheepskins laid fur side up, their warmth treasured and shared, and you remember the rare nights when such a hide lay beneath you, how everyone pressed closer to it without a word. The straw whispers softly with every movement, dry and brittle, flattened by weeks of use, and beneath it the earth smells faintly of dampness where snow has melted near the door. Fleas live here too, an uninvited but expected presence, and you scratch absently at your arm before exhaustion pulls your hand still again. Discomfort is constant, but so is familiarity, and over time the body learns to rest within it, not deeply, not fully, but enough. As the night stretches on, sleep comes in fragments, drifting in and out, because medieval rest is rarely a single uninterrupted plunge into darkness. You wake without alarm, without fear, simply because this is how the body moves through long winter nights, slipping from a first sleep into a quiet waking period where thoughts wander and the fire is checked, then back again into a second, deeper rest before dawn. You lie there listening, aware of every breath around you, every creak of timber, every faint sound outside muffled by snow, and in this half-waking state, the hut feels suspended in time, held between darkness and morning. No one speaks loudly now because silence itself is part of survival, conserving warmth, conserving breath, conserving strength, and the embers glow faintly beneath their blanket of ash, waiting patiently to be stirred back to life. The animals settle, the wind eases, and you feel the weight of the quilt press more evenly across the bodies beneath it, binding everyone together into a single breathing mass. And as your eyes grow heavy once more, you begin to sense that sleeping in a medieval wooden hut was never about comfort or privacy, but about adaptation, about layering warmth wherever it could be found, in clothing, in animals, in shared breath, and in the quiet knowledge that surviving the night was itself a small victory, one repeated again and again through the long, brutal winters that shaped this world. As the night deepens and the hut settles into a fragile calm, your awareness drifts toward the fire, because everything here ultimately revolves around it, and without its steady presence the cold would claim the space in minutes. The hearth is nothing more than a shallow pit at the center of the floor, stones darkened by years of soot arranged around it, and above, there is no true chimney, only a crude opening in the roof where some smoke escapes while the rest lingers, curling lazily beneath the rafters. The air stings your eyes and scratches at your throat, yet this discomfort is accepted as the price of warmth, because a fire without smoke is a luxury few huts can afford. A well-established historical fact is that most medieval wooden huts relied on these open hearths, and families learned to live in a constant haze, their lungs hardened by it, their clothing permanently scented with ash and resin. You cough softly, careful not to wake anyone, and feel the familiar dryness in your throat, knowing that everyone here carries the same irritation, the same slow-burning ache that comes from breathing smoky air night after night. Some scholars argue that this smoke may have reduced insects and preserved food hanging from the rafters, while others suggest it weakened lungs and shortened lives, and lying here half awake, you suspect both are true. The fire has been banked carefully, embers buried beneath a blanket of ash to keep them alive until morning, without wasting precious wood, because gathering fuel in winter is a relentless task, and every log must be stretched as far as possible. You remember watching your father perform this ritual each night, his movements slow and deliberate, as though he were tucking the fire itself into sleep, and you know how much depends on his skill. If the embers die, rekindling them in the damp cold can take hours, fingers numb, breath fogging uselessly as sparks refuse to catch. There is comfort in knowing the fire still breathes beneath the ash, a faint red pulse like a hidden heart, and this quiet assurance allows your body to relax, just enough to drift again, though not deeply. Sleep here is never heavy or complete. It is light, easily disturbed, shaped by sound, smoke, and the shared presence of others. The hut speaks constantly, timbers groaning as temperatures shift, the roof sighing under snow, the door rattling faintly as the wind probes for weakness. Outside, the world is muffled, wrapped in snow that absorbs sound and turns the forest into a distant, indistinct presence. And yet danger never feels far away. Wolves exist as much in the mind as in reality, their howls carried by stories as often as by wind, and even if none prowl nearby tonight, the possibility sharpens every noise. Your body remains alert in a way you barely notice, tuned to changes in the animal's movements, to the sudden silence that might mean something has gone wrong. At some point you wake again without knowing why, suspended in that quiet middle hour between sleeps, and you realize that others are awake too, though no one announces it. A cough here, a shift of straw there, the faint scrape of a hand against wool, all signs that rest comes in shared waves. This is the time when thoughts wander most freely, when the darkness feels thick and the mind fills the gaps with memory and imagination. You think of the floor beneath you, the packed earth, cold and unyielding, softened only by straw and rushes that must be replaced when spring comes. And you remember how damp it grows near the door where snow melts and seeps inside. Families tried to fight this with layers of dry leaves or reeds, sometimes even scattering herbs for scent and superstition. But winter always finds a way in. The ground breathes cold upward, and you curl tighter, pressing closer to the bodies beside you, because warmth here is not evenly distributed. It pools and shifts, and you learn instinctively how to position yourself within it. The animals stir again, sensing the subtle change in the night, and the pig lets out a low, irritated grunt before settling, its heat radiating comfort through the straw. The goat shifts its weight, hooves scraping softly, and the chicken flutters once, then stills, and these sounds reassure you more than silence ever could. Noise means life, movement means warmth, and warmth means survival. Your thoughts drift towards stories you have heard, whispered during these same hours on other nights. Tales of spirits drawn to cold breath and low fires, of unseen hands that slip through cracks in the walls, and though you no longer believe them as fully as you did as a child, the darkness gives them space to breathe. Many families hang herbs or iron charms near the door, not necessarily because they believe with certainty, but because belief itself offers comfort, and comfort matters here. Eventually, the pull of second sleep grows stronger, heavier, and your body yields again, sinking into the straw, as your breathing slows to match the rhythm around you. The fire remains quiet, the hut holds, the storm outside pauses, and for a while the world feels suspended, as though winter itself has drawn a breath and is waiting. And in this waiting you begin to understand that sleeping in a medieval wooden hut was not a single act, but a long negotiation with cold, smoke, fear, and fatigue, repeated night after night, shaped by habit and necessity, carried forward by the simple, stubborn will to wake again when morning finally arrives. At some point in the deep of the night, when even the embers seem to hesitate beneath their veil of ash, the hut groans in a way that pulls you gently but firmly back toward waking, not with panic, but with a quiet awareness that the structure itself is alive and responding to the weight of winter. Snow has been falling steadily for hours now. You can sense it even without looking, because the sounds outside have softened, muffled as though the world has been wrapped in wool, and the air inside feels heavier, warmer in places, yet burdened by the silent pressure pressing against the walls. Accounts from medieval villages describe nights like this as some of the most dangerous, not because of wind or wolves, but because snow accumulated patiently, piling against doors, weighing down thatched roofs, turning humble huts into fragile shelters under strain. You lie still, listening to the beams above you creak slowly, not sharply as they do in wind, but with a deeper, slower complaint, wood bending under a burden it was never meant to carry for long. Somewhere near the door, cold creeps inward where snow has packed itself tight, sealing gaps but also stealing space, and the air shifts subtly as if the hut itself is breathing more shallowly. Your father stirs long before the children do, because experience has taught him that snow is not something to ignore. He rises quietly, lifting a wooden shovel kept near the door, and when he presses against it, the door resists for a moment before giving way, spilling fine powder across the floor and flooding the hut with sharp, icy air. You shiver instinctively, pulling the quilt tighter, as he clears just enough snow to ensure the door will open again by morning, muttering under his breath, not in anger but in concentration, because every movement matters when strength must last through the winter. There is an old belief, whispered in villages, that snow could be both enemy and ally, and even scholars have echoed this duality centuries later. Thick drifts pressed against the walls could act as insulation, trapping warmth inside like the rounded walls of an igloo. Yet that same weight could crush a poorly supported roof without warning. You feel this contradiction now as the hut seems warmer, quieter, yet more fragile, every sound above drawing your attention upward. The animals sense it too. The goat shifts restlessly, stamping once before settling again, ears flicking toward the ceiling, and the pig burrows deeper into straw, instinctively seeking the warmest, most stable place. Chickens rustle uneasily, feathers brushing wood, their small movements rippling through the stillness. In some villages, animals were watched closely during heavy snow, because their unease was taken as a warning, a sign that the roof might soon give way, and families prepared themselves mentally for the possibility of a sudden escape into the frozen dark. Your mother pulls the blanket closer around the children, her movements calm and deliberate, her voice low as she whispers reassurance that is as much for herself as for anyone else. Fear here is never loud. It is controlled, folded neatly away so it does not consume precious energy. You understand this instinctively even as a child, that panic wastes warmth, wastes breath, wastes strength. The hut creaks again, but it holds and slowly your body adjusts to the new stillness. Snow has transformed the night, absorbing the wind, muting the forest, pressing the world into a quieter shape. Some medieval writers described snow as a kind of divine hush, a blanket laid over the land, dangerous yet oddly protective, and lying here surrounded by bodies and breath, you feel both truths at once. Time stretches, unmeasured by clocks, marked only by changes in sound and sensation. The embers continue their patient glow beneath the ash. The animals settle once more, and the weight on the roof seems to stabilize. You rest your palm briefly against the wall, feeling the faint chill where snow meets wood, and then draw your hand back under the quilt, reminded that even the smallest movement exposes skin to winter's reach. Gradually, exhaustion reclaims its hold. The fear does not vanish, but it softens, dulled by repetition and familiarity, because this is not the first night you have listened to beams complain under snow, and it will not be the last. Generations before you have done the same, pressing close, trusting wood, trusting fire, trusting that morning will come as it always has. Your breathing slows again, syncing with those around you, and the hut settles into a careful equilibrium, held together by weight, warmth, and quiet resolve. Snow continues to fall outside, piling silently, reshaping the world beyond the walls, while inside, life waits patiently, suspended in warmth and darkness, preparing to endure whatever the dawn will bring. And as sleep drifts back over you, light but persistent, you begin to sense how every medieval winter night was not merely something to survive, but something to negotiate moment by moment, with wood and fire and breath, until the long darkness finally loosened its grip. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the night begins to loosen its grip on the hut, not with light, but with subtle changes in sound and temperature that your body recognizes long before your eyes do. The silence shifts, becoming thinner, and somewhere far away beneath the layers of cloud and falling snow, morning is beginning its long approach. You feel it as a faint easing of the cold near your face, a barely noticeable softening of the air, as though winter itself has paused to rest. The embers beneath the ash breathe a little stronger now, not because they have grown, but because the hut has grown quieter, and in the absence of movement every warmth feels amplified. Your father stirs again, this time with purpose rather than caution, brushing ash aside with careful hands until the hidden glow reveals itself in dull reds and oranges, alive despite the night's long attempt to smother it. A single piece of wood is added, then another, and slowly the fire remembers itself, flame licking upward, smoke thickening once more beneath the rafters. Around you, bodies begin to shift in response, not waking fully but adjusting instinctively toward the renewed warmth. A child sighs and curls tighter. Someone coughs softly. The pig grunts in irritation before settling again, and the goat exhales a long breath as if relieved that the night has not claimed the hearth after all. The hut fills once more with that familiar mix of smoke and breath, and though your eyes sting, the warmth is welcome, a signal that endurance has paid off. You remain lying still, wrapped in the heavy quilt, reluctant to break the fragile balance by moving too quickly. Morning in winter does not arrive with urgency. It creeps in slowly, allowing the body time to gather strength for the cold tasks ahead. Outside, snow no longer falls, and the hush it left behind feels deeper, as if the world itself is holding its breath. A faint blue-grey light seeps through the smallest cracks in the walls and roof, just enough to outline shapes without revealing detail. Faces remain mostly hidden, but you can see the curve of your mother's shoulder, the rise and fall of your father's chest, the tangled limbs of siblings and cousins who sought shelter together in the night. The communal heap that served as a bed now looks less like rest and more like evidence of survival, a temporary arrangement held together by necessity and shared warmth. No one speaks yet, because words still feel too heavy for the cold air, and silence remains part of the ritual. The fire crackles gently, straw shifts as someone adjusts their position, and outside a distant sound reaches you, perhaps a bird calling cautiously, testing the morning. That sound carries weight, because it means the night has ended without disaster. No roof collapse, no wolves at the door, no embers lost to ash. You know that soon the hut will fill with movement, with the scrape of bowls and the soft clatter of tools, with children rubbing sleep from their eyes, and adults preparing themselves for another day shaped by winter's limits. But for now, this moment exists between sleeping and rising, between warmth held and warmth spent, and you allow yourself to linger in it, gathering what strength you can. The quilt still presses heavy across your body, the smoke still hangs low, the animals still breathe beside you, and the cold still waits patiently beyond the walls. Nothing has truly changed, and yet everything has, because you have crossed another night, another test quietly passed. And as the fire grows steadier, and the faint light strengthens just enough to show the frost still clinging to the rafters, you sense that the story of how people slept in wooden huts during brutal medieval winters is not a single night's tale, but a long chain of mornings like this one, each beginning in smoke and silence, each demanding that life be taken up again, slowly, deliberately, without complaint. The hut does not wake all at once, but in layers, like the fire itself, and as the light strengthens just enough to show breath in the air, small movements ripple through the heap of sleepers, each person emerging slowly from warmth into awareness. Someone shifts a shoulder, another draws the quilt closer for a final moment. A child rubs sleep from their eyes and presses their face into wool to delay the cold a little longer, because rising means surrendering the last pocket of shared heat that survived the night. Your mother is the first to sit up fully, careful and quiet, lifting the baby from her chest and wrapping him tighter against her shoulder, rocking gently as though motion alone might replace warmth. Your father crouches closer to the hearth, feeding the fire more deliberately now, coaxing it into a steadier flame that will last through the first tasks of the morning. because winter days begin not with conversation but with action. The smell of smoke thickens again, sharper than before, and though your eyes sting, you welcome it, because smoke means fire, and fire means life. The bedding begins to unravel as bodies separate reluctantly, limbs stiff from cold and cramped sleep, straw clinging to clothing and hair. The pallet that held everyone through the night now looks flattened and uneven, darkened in places by dampness and wear, and soon it will be pushed aside or shaken out, not because it is clean, but because it must serve again tonight. In winter, nothing is ever truly put away, only repositioned for the next cycle. The animals stir more fully now, sensing movement and warmth returning to the space. The pig snorts and rises, shaking straw from its side. The goat stretches its legs with a soft bleat, and the chickens flutter down from their perch, feet scratching against the floor as they search instinctively for food. Their presence fills the hut with sound and motion, and with it, a sense that the night's stillness has been replaced by the work of staying alive. Cold rushes in with every movement, creeping into places where warmth had pooled during the night, and you feel it immediately on your cheeks and fingers. You pull your cloak tighter, fingers clumsy as they find familiar folds of fabric, and you realize how quickly warmth disappears once bodies separate. This is why mornings are hard, not because of labor yet to come, but because the night's fragile victory dissolves so quickly into cold. Outside, the world remains pale and muffled, snow piled high against the hut, reshaping the landscape into something quieter and more dangerous. Your father pushes the door open again, shoveling snow away with slow, steady effort, each movement measured, because even this early exertion costs energy the body can ill afford to waste. Cold air floods inside briefly, sharp and biting, and everyone winces before the door is pulled shut again, sealing the hut back into its smoky warmth. There is little talk as the morning settles in, only murmurs and gestures because words are unnecessary and breath is precious. A crust of bread is broken and passed, thin ale poured into wooden cups and warmed near the fire, not as a meal but as preparation, a way to steady the body before facing the day. You chew slowly, feeling warmth spread faintly through your chest, knowing it will not last long once you step outside. The night's sleep already feels distant, like something that happened in another life, yet its effects remain etched into your body, in the stiffness of joints, the dryness of your throat, the dull ache behind your eyes from smoke and restless dreams. Sleep here is never something you finish. It is something you carry with you into the day, incomplete and lingering. As you sit there wrapped in wool and smoke, watching frost melt slowly from the rafters as the fire strengthens, you begin to understand that medieval sleep was not an escape from hardship, but part of it, woven tightly into the rhythm of survival. Night did not offer rest so much as pause, a brief holding of warmth and breath before the cold demanded attention again. And as the hut fills with the quiet preparations of another winter day, with fire crackling and snow waiting beyond thin wooden walls, you sense that the story of how people slept here cannot be separated from how they lived, because every night flowed directly into morning, and every morning carried the weight of the night before, an endless cycle of endurance that shaped bodies, habits, and memories long after the embers of any single fire had faded. As the morning grows a little brighter, though still pale and cold, you begin to notice how sleep itself has changed your body, not by restoring it fully, but by carrying it just far enough to endure another cycle. Your limbs feel heavy, joints stiff as though winter has settled inside them overnight, and when you flex your fingers, the sensation is slow and reluctant, as if warmth must be summoned deliberately, one small movement at a time. This is not the kind of waking that feels refreshed or renewed, but rather one that feels negotiated, a careful agreement between exhaustion and necessity. The hut smells different now that the fire is alive again, smoke sharper and more immediate, mixing with the faint scent of bread crusts and damp wool, and you realize that scent itself is part of waking. Medieval sleep never truly ended at a clear boundary. It thinned, faded, and blended into morning, guided by smell, sound, and temperature rather than clocks or light. The crackle of burning wood replaces the rhythm of breathing that carried you through the night, and the soft murmurs of adults planning the day replace dreams before they can fully settle. You watch your father move carefully, conserving energy even in small gestures, because winter punishes waste. Each log placed on the fire is chosen, not thrown, and each movement is purposeful, not hurried. Your mother straightens the bedding, shaking straw free from blankets, not to clean it, but to let air move through it, because stagnant straw grows colder and damper faster. These motions are practiced, automatic, learned over years of mornings just like this one, where sleep is already behind you but fatigue still clings tightly. The animals are fully awake now, filling the hut with life and sound. The pig noses through the straw for scraps. The goat pulls gently against its tether, eager for feed, and the chickens cluck softly, impatient and alert. Their presence reminds you that sleep in this world is never a private act. It is shared not only with family, but with every living thing under the roof. Even dreams are influenced by them, shaped by warmth, movement and sound, as much as by the mind itself. You sit quietly, letting the last traces of sleep drain away, and realize how little separation there is between night and day here. There is no clean break, no moment where one clearly ends and the other begins. Instead, everything overlaps, rest spilling into work, dreams bleeding into waking thoughts, fatigue carried forward like a tool you simply learn to use. This is why medieval people spoke of sleep, not as a luxury but as a necessity taken in pieces whenever it could be found. Outside, the snow reflects the early light, turning the world pale and vast, and you know that soon you will step into it, your breath turning to clouds again, your feet numbing despite layers of cloth. The memory of the night's warmth already feels distant, even though it has only just passed, and you sense how quickly comfort evaporates once the body separates from shared heat. As the hut continues to wake, voices grow slightly stronger, though still low, and plans are made in fragments, gestures and half-sentences. Wood must be gathered, animals fed, paths cleared, and none of it can wait, no matter how tired you feel. Sleep has done its work, imperfect as it is, and now the day demands its due. Yet, even as the morning claims you, the habits of the night linger, shaping how you move, how you think, how you prepare yourself for the cold. You remain wrapped in layers, still half inside the memory of the quilt, still carrying the rhythm of shared breathing, still aware that when darkness returns, you will once again seek the same warmth, the same closeness, the same fragile refuge against winter. And as you rise slowly from the straw, stepping carefully into the smoky air, you begin to understand that in a medieval wooden hut, sleep was never something left behind at dawn, but something carried forward, quietly shaping every step, every choice, every breath, as the long winter day unfolds. When you finally rise fully from the straw, the warmth of the night leaves you almost immediately, as though it had been a borrowed thing that must now be returned, and the cold reaches for you without hesitation, wrapping around ankles, wrists and neck with familiar insistence. You stamp your feet softly to wake them, not hard enough to waste energy, just enough to remind blood to move again, and you notice how everyone else does the same. Small ritual movements repeated each morning without thought, because the body has learned its own language of survival. The bedding, once a nest of warmth and breath, is now little more than flattened straw and damp fabric, and your mother lifts the quilt carefully, folding it not to make it neat, but to keep it from absorbing more moisture from the floor. It will be needed again tonight, unchanged, carrying the same smells, the same weight, the same history stitched into its seams. Nothing here is temporary, yet nothing is permanent either. Everything exists in a state of reuse and endurance, shaped by how long it can last through winter. As the fire strengthens, the hut fills with that low orange light that never truly feels like day, only a deeper shade of night, and you watch frost melt slowly from the rafters, dripping into the ash below with soft hisses. Each drop feels significant, a reminder that even ice must eventually yield. though not without leaving its mark. The walls sweat faintly where snow presses from outside, and the smell of damp wood grows stronger, blending with smoke until the two are inseparable. Someone opens a small clay pot near the hearth, and the faint scent of thin porridge rises into the air, barely enough to be called food, yet enough to steady the body. You take a few careful spoonfuls, feeling warmth spread slowly through your stomach, knowing it will not last long once work begins, but grateful for it nonetheless. Medieval winter mornings were never generous. They offered just enough to continue, never enough to feel satisfied. The sounds of the village begin to reach you now, faint and distant through the snow, a dog barking, wood splitting somewhere nearby, a muffled voice calling out, each noise confirming that other huts have survived the night too. There is comfort in this knowledge, even if unspoken, a shared understanding that everyone around you has woken cold, stiff, and tired, carrying the same weight of unfinished sleep into the day. You glance back at the place where you lay only moments ago, and are struck by how quickly it has lost its magic, how the nest of warmth becomes ordinary once bodies move away from it. This is why people lingered in bed as long as possible in winter, not out of laziness, but because warmth was fragile and expensive, and once lost, difficult to reclaim. Sleep itself feels less important than the heat it gathered around it. As preparations continue, your mind drifts back to the night, to the way it unfolded in pieces, waking and sleeping woven together, shaped by fire, fear, and shared breath. You realize that rest here is never a single event, but a series of small recoveries scattered through darkness and day alike. A moment leaning against the wall, a pause by the fire, a few breaths taken in stillness. These are as much a part of rest as the hours spent beneath the quilt. The hut feels different now. Louder, more purposeful, yet still enclosed, still smoky, still vulnerable. Winter has not loosened its grip. It has merely allowed you to move again within it. You pull your cloak tighter, preparing to step outside, knowing that tonight you will return to this same space, this same straw, this same careful arrangement of bodies and warmth. And as you pause at the door, one last look at the embers glowing steadily behind you, you understand something quietly profound, that medieval sleep was never meant to refresh or restore in the way we imagine today, but simply to carry the body across darkness without breaking it, to keep life burning low but steady until morning, again and again through winters that measured survival not in comfort, but in persistence. The day waits beyond the door, cold and demanding, and the night waits too, already forming at the edges of thought, patient and inevitable, ready to begin the cycle once more when the light finally fades. Stepping outside, even for a moment, feels like crossing a boundary between two different worlds, because the cold does not ease you into it but claims you instantly, biting at your face and hands with a sharp clarity that makes the smoky warmth of the hut feel almost imaginary in comparison. Snow lies deep and undisturbed, swallowing sound and distance alike, and the village appears hushed, each wooden hut half buried and rounded by drifts, smoke rising in thin, hesitant threads from roof holes like signs of quiet survival rather than signs of comfort. You breathe in and the air stings your lungs, clean and unforgiving, and for a moment you understand why people lingered indoors as long as possible, why sleep stretched late into winter mornings when work allowed. Because once you leave the shared warmth of bodies and fire, every step costs energy that must be carefully rationed. Your boots crunch softly through snow packed hard by yesterday's cold, and you move slowly, conserving heat, aware that even small mistakes here carry weight. Inside the hut behind you, life continues without pause. The fire crackles, animals shift, voices murmur low, and the space that carried you through the night now prepares itself to do so again when darkness returns. The straw pallet will be shaken out and spread anew, the quilt folded and set aside, the embers guarded, because sleep here is not a private event, but a shared resource that must be protected and maintained like food or fuel. As the morning advances, you notice how the memory of sleep, lingers not in the mind but in the body. Your muscles feel thick and slow, your thoughts slightly dulled, as though rest has taken the sharpest edge off exhaustion, but left its weight intact. This is how winter rest works, not fully healing, but just sufficient, enough to prevent collapse, enough to allow another cycle of labor and waiting to begin. You remember stories told by elders, how people once believed that winter sleep changed the blood itself, making it thicker, heavier, slower, and though modern words might describe it differently, you can feel the truth of it in your limbs. Everything moves at a reduced pace in winter, including rest, and perhaps this is why the nights feel so long and layered, broken into waking and dreaming, fire tending and quiet reflection, because the body resists being still for too long in the cold. As the sun climbs just high enough to be seen through cloud and haze, its light reflecting off the snow without warmth, you feel the pull of the hut again, the knowledge that any warmth gained outside will be brief. The day will be spent in careful motion, clearing paths, feeding animals, gathering what fuel can be found, always with one thought quietly present beneath the others. That night will return, and with it the need to build warmth once more from bodies, cloth, straw, and fire. The hut waits patiently, unchanged, ready to receive you again when the light fades, because in winter it is not merely a shelter, but a rhythm, a place where time slows and repeats, where sleep is not a single moment of escape, but a long continuous negotiation with cold and fatigue. You sense that every night spent there leaves a mark, shaping how you rest, how you dream, how you wake, until the seasons themselves feel carved into the body. And as the pale morning stretches on, carrying the weight of the night behind it, you move forward knowing that when darkness gathers again, you will return to the same straw, the same smoke, the same shared breath, to rest not because you are comfortable, but because resting is the only way to endure what winter still has to offer. As the day wears on, and the pale winter light never quite warms the air, the memory of the night settles deeper into your body, lingering in the stiffness of your shoulders and the faint ache behind your eyes, a reminder that rest here is never complete, only sufficient. Every task you perform carries the echo of sleep cut short and shared, because the way you slept has shaped how you move now, carefully, deliberately, conserving strength as though it were another dwindling resource like firewood or grain. When evening begins to creep back in, not with color but with the slow dimming of an already grey sky, you feel the pull of the hut again, stronger than hunger or fatigue. Winter days are short and winter nights long, and as the light fades, the work itself seems to retreat, surrendering the hours back to darkness. The animals are brought closer, paths are checked, and wood is counted with quiet concern, because tonight will demand the same rituals as the night before, and the night before that, stretching back further than memory. Inside the hut, the air thickens once more with smoke as the fire is fed carefully, not generously, just enough to build warmth without wasting fuel. Shadows gather along the walls early, and the rafters fade into darkness again, frost already beginning to creep back where the day's heat never truly reached. The straw pallet is spread once more, flattened and familiar, its uneven surface accepted without comment, because complaining would change nothing, and endurance has no patience for protest. As darkness fully settles, bodies return to the center of the hut, almost instinctively, drawn together by cold and habit. Cloaks are pulled tighter, scarves wound higher, caps tugged low over ears, and the quilt is unfolded again, heavy with the weight of countless nights. You take your place among the others, fitting yourself into the shared space like a piece returning to a well-worn puzzle, knowing exactly where warmth gathers and where draughts tend to slip through. The fire crackles softly, animals settle with low sounds of discomfort and relief, and the hut resumes its nighttime breathing, a slow exchange of warmth and smoke and air. Sleep begins not with silence but with gradual surrender, conversations fading into murmurs, movements slowing, eyes closing one by one as exhaustion outweighs awareness. This is how rest arrives here, not as a sudden drop into darkness, but as a gentle dimming of the senses. You lie back on the straw, feeling the quilt settle over you, the weight reassuring despite its roughness, and you realize that the night is already shaping itself again, repeating familiar patterns with slight variations. Perhaps there will be wind later, perhaps snow, perhaps coughing or restless animals, perhaps dreams that blur fear and memory. But whatever comes, the response will be the same: closeness, warmth, patience. And as the fire's glow softens and the hut sounds begin their slow nighttime rhythm once more, you let your breathing fall into sync with those around you, knowing that sleep will come in pieces again, as it always does here, carrying you gently, imperfectly, through another long medieval winter night, without yet asking how many more still lie ahead. As the night settles in again, you notice how familiar everything feels, not comforting in the modern sense, but predictable. And in winter, predictability itself becomes a kind of shelter. The fire lowers to a steady murmur, not bright enough to cheer, but strong enough to hold the cold at bay for a while, and the hut resumes its slow breathing, wood contracting softly as temperatures fall outside. You lie still, letting the warmth collect where bodies meet, feeling how the shared heat rises and shifts like a living thing that must be carefully preserved. Sleep does not take you immediately, and instead your mind drifts in that narrow space between rest and awareness, where thoughts move slowly and without urgency. You become aware again of the sounds that will carry you through the night: the rusp of wool against straw, the soft wheeze of breath, the distant groan of timber, and the occasional restless movement of an animal seeking a more comfortable position. These sounds no longer startle you. They are as expected as the dark itself, a reassurance that life continues inside these thin walls. Your body adjusts instinctively, drawing knees closer, tucking hands beneath cloth, minimizing exposed skin in small unconscious gestures learned over many winters. Even your breathing changes, becoming slower and shallower, conserving warmth, syncing with the rhythm around you. This is how the body learns to sleep in cold places, not by relaxing fully, but by holding itself just tight enough to endure. At some point, the fire is banked again, embers hidden beneath ash with the same care as before, and the glow fades to a dull red pulse barely visible through the haze. The room darkens, shadows thickening until the boundaries between bodies and walls blur, and you feel less like an individual and more like part of a single breathing form pressed together in the center of the hut. Privacy dissolves here, replaced by proximity, and over time even thoughts seem shared, drifting and settling as one. The animals settle too, their movements slowing, their warmth radiating quietly into the space. The pig's steady breathing becomes a low rhythm beneath the human sounds. The goat exhales in long, patient sighs, and the chickens tuck themselves into stillness above. Their presence is constant and grounding, a reminder that survival here is collective, spanning species as well as family. You drift in and out of sleep, dreams shallow and fleeting, interrupted not by fear, but by the simple realities of the night. A cough draws you briefly awake. A shift of weight nudges you closer to warmth. A distant sound outside registers without fully forming into alarm. Each waking is brief, each return to sleep gentle, as though the night itself understands the need to move slowly. In these hours, time loses its shape. There is no sense of how long you have been asleep or awake. Only the awareness of warmth held and warmth threatened, of rest taken in small, careful portions. This is the rhythm winter demands, and resisting it would only bring exhaustion sooner. Eventually your breathing deepens again, your muscles loosen just enough, and you sink back into the straw, letting the quilt's weight press you down, anchoring you against the cold. The hut remains fragile, the fire imperfect, the night relentless, yet within this small circle of warmth, endurance continues quietly, moment by moment, breath by breath, carrying you forward without promise, without conclusion, only persistence. Somewhere deep in the night, when even the animals seem to have surrendered to stillness, you become aware of how the cold behaves like a thinking thing, patient and observant, never rushing, simply waiting for a moment of weakness. It does not crash into the hut or announce itself loudly. Instead, it slides along the floor, seeps through the packed earth, brushes ankles and fingertips, testing whether the circle of warmth has loosened enough to be claimed. You pull your feet closer beneath you without waking fully, a movement learned so early in life that it happens before thought, before fear. The quilt shifts as others do the same, each small adjustment redistributing warmth, and for a while the balance holds. Breath rises and falls around you, slow and uneven, the combined exhalations forming a faint haze that gathers beneath the rafters and disappears into the smoky dark. Your face is warm, your back is warm, but your knees and shoulders feel the edge of winter pressing in, and you understand instinctively that sleep here is always conditional, granted only as long as warmth can be defended. A faint sound reaches you from outside, not a howl or a cry, but the subtle settling of snow sliding down the side of the hut, the whisper of weight rearranging itself. The sound is soft, almost soothing, yet it carries meaning because snow changes everything it touches. It muffles danger, but it also conceals it, reshapes familiar paths, alters the way sound travels. Nights after snowfall feel heavier, closer, as though the world has leaned in to listen. Inside, the hut responds in small ways. A beam creaks, adjusting to pressure. Straw shifts as someone turns. The goat lifts its head briefly, and then lowers it again, satisfied that nothing immediate threatens. These signals are read without conscious thought, absorbed into your sense of safety or unease, because living here means learning to listen with the whole body, not just the ears. Your thoughts drift toward spring without effort, not because it is near, but because it must exist somewhere beyond this long stretch of cold. You imagine the hut with its door flung open, smoke escaping freely, straw replaced with fresh rushes, nights shorter and gentler. The image does not excite you so much as steady you, giving the night a distant horizon to move toward. Winter sleep is sustained as much by imagination as by fire. A cough breaks the quiet again, softer this time, and you feel the tension ripple through the sleeping bodies before easing. Illness always feels closer at night, when there is nothing to do but listen and wait. And you know that if fever comes, the same strategies will be used as always. More layers, more closeness, more fire, if it can be spared, more whispered prayers. Sleep becomes both refuge and battleground, the place where the body fights silently while the world stands still. The fire remains banked, its hidden warmth steady but restrained, and the hut holds its breath around it. You are dimly aware that dawn is still far away, that there are many hours yet to pass in this slow cycle of dozing and waking, listening and settling, but the knowledge does not trouble you. Time moves differently here, measured in endurance rather than minutes. Gradually, your thoughts thin and drift apart, no longer forming clear images, only sensations, the pressure of the quilt, the warmth of bodies, the dull ache of cold held at bay. Sleep returns not as a plunge, but as a soft folding inward, layers of awareness closing one by one, until only the most basic rhythm remains, breath matching breath, warmth balanced against cold, life continuing quietly within thin wooden walls, as winter waits patiently outside. At some point, without any clear signal, the night deepens again, as though it has decided to linger longer than expected, and you find yourself half awake, half submerged in sleep, suspended in that familiar medieval in-between where thoughts are slow and the body feels distant. The cold has not grown stronger, but it has become more persistent, pressing gently but insistently against the edges of warmth, reminding you that rest here is never given freely, only borrowed for a while. You notice how your breathing changes when you sleep in such conditions, shorter and more controlled, as though your body instinctively knows not to waste heat on deep, expansive breaths. The air you exhale hangs briefly in front of your face, a faint ghost of yourself that vanishes as quickly as it forms, and you wonder how many thousands of nights have been breathed this way inside huts, just like this one, breaths stacking upon breaths across centuries, unseen and unrecorded, yet essential. The quilt shifts again as someone nearby turns, and for a moment a thin ribbon of cold slips through, sharp enough to pull you closer to waking. You respond without thought, drawing your knees in, tucking your chin, sealing the gap with practiced efficiency, and almost immediately the warmth returns, imperfect but sufficient. This constant adjustment is part of sleep here, a quiet conversation between body and environment that never truly stops. Outside, the snow continues its slow work, settling, compressing, insulating, and threatening all at once. You imagine it piling higher against the walls, rounding the hut's shape, until it resembles something grown rather than built, a low mound of survival pressed into the earth. Some villagers believed that huts buried in snow were safer from spirits, hidden from wandering eyes, protected by nature's own covering, and lying here, you can understand why the idea took hold. The world feels sealed off, distant, as though winter has wrapped you away from everything else. Inside, the animals breathe steadily, their warmth anchoring the space. The pig's slow rhythm is almost hypnotic, a deep, grounding presence that reassures you more than silence ever could. The goat shifts once, then stills again, satisfied, and above, the hens remain tucked and quiet, their small bodies conserving heat just as carefully as the humans below. In this shared stillness, differences fade. Everyone follows the same rules now. Your thoughts wander again, not sharply but gently, tracing familiar paths. You think of elders who taught you how to sleep this way, how to turn just so, how to keep hands hidden, how to recognize the difference between harmless noises and those that demand attention. None of this was written down, yet it was learned thoroughly, passed from body to body, night after night, through demonstration rather than instruction. Sleep comes and goes in shallow waves. You dream briefly of warmth, not fire or sun, but of summer nights when the hut door stayed open and air moved freely, when sleep came heavier and longer, when bodies could spread out instead of clustering tight. The dream dissolves quickly, replaced by the reality of wool, straw, and breath, but it leaves behind a faint softness, just enough to ease the edge of fatigue. The fire remains quiet, its presence felt more than seen, a muted reassurance beneath the ash. You trust it without thinking, the way you trust the hut, the way you trust the people pressed against you. Because trust here is not optimism but habit, built from nights that ended in morning, often enough to make belief unnecessary. As your awareness drifts again, you sense the long continuity of nights like this one, stretching backward through time, identical in their essentials even as faces and names change. Cold, closeness, smoke, breath, waiting. This is how sleep survives winter, not by defeating it, but by enduring alongside it, adapting quietly, yielding just enough to persist. And so you settle once more, muscles easing, thoughts thinning, the hut holding, the night continuing its slow passage, carrying you gently forward without conclusion, without certainty, only with the steady promise that for now, warmth still exists, where bodies meet and breath continues to rise into the dark. Somewhere far beyond the hut, the night continues its slow turning, but inside time feels almost suspended, stretched thin between breaths, between the faint pulse of warmth and the ever-present awareness of cold waiting patiently beyond the walls. You are aware now of how deeply the body learns this rhythm, how even in half-sleep it listens, measures and adjusts, guarding heat the way one might guard a flame cupped in bare hands. Nothing here is wasted, not movement, not breath, not even thought, because winter demands restraint in all things. The straw beneath you has grown flatter with each passing hour, pressed down by weight and warmth, and when you shift slightly you feel the packed earth beneath, cold and unyielding, reminding you that the hut is only a thin interruption between flesh and frost. You respond instinctively by pressing closer to the bodies beside you, not seeking comfort but balance, because warmth here behaves like water, flowing toward the lowest point, pooling where contact is greatest. The quilt follows this movement, settling into new folds, its patched surface molding itself to the shapes beneath, sealing in what little heat has been gathered. Your mind drifts again, not into dreams exactly, but into memory, recalling other winters, other nights that followed the same pattern, the same long negotiation between exhaustion and cold. You remember being younger, smaller, tucked deeper into the center of the sleeping heap, shielded by adults whose bodies formed a barrier against drafts and fear alike. Now you are closer to the edge, more aware of the cold's reach, more responsible for maintaining the fragile circle of warmth, and the realization settles quietly without resentment. This is simply how time moves here, how roles shift without ceremony. The hut answers the cold with small sounds, the faint tick of contracting wood, the soft sigh of thatch under snow, each noise familiar enough to be almost comforting. You know which creaks belong to the roof settling, and which might signal something less ordinary, and this knowledge allows your body to remain relaxed even when the night speaks. Fear has not vanished, but it has been shaped into something manageable, something that no longer startles but instructs. Breath continues to rise and fall around you, uneven and layered, each person sleeping at a slightly different depth, drifting in and out of awareness on their own quiet schedule. Someone mutters softly, words lost before they fully form, another shifts and then stills, and the animals remain steady, their warmth constant, their presence grounding. This shared rhythm becomes a kind of lullaby, not sung but lived, carrying everyone gently through the darkest hours. You sense without seeing that dawn is still distant, that many hours remain before the light returns, yet the knowledge does not weigh heavily. The night is no longer something to be endured moment by moment, but something familiar, a space where the rules are known and followed without thought. Cold presses, warmth gathers, sleep comes and goes, and life continues quietly within this fragile shelter. As your thoughts thin and soften once more, you feel yourself drifting deeper into rest, not because the conditions have improved, but because the body has accepted them. This is the secret of sleeping through brutal medieval winters. Not comfort, not escape, but adaptation. A slow, learned surrender to what cannot be changed, paired with careful attention to what can. The hut holds, the fire breathes beneath its ash, bodies remain close, and the night stretches on, unbroken, patient, carrying you forward still, without conclusion, without relief, only with the steady persistence of survival unfolding one quiet hour at a time. The night seems to thicken again, not growing darker so much as heavier, as though the cold has decided to lean its full weight against the hut, testing the patience of wood and clay, of breath and cloth. You feel it first along the floor, a creeping numbness that slips beneath the straw and presses upward, reminding you that the earth itself is frozen solid, and that everything living here survives only by staying slightly above it. Your toes curl instinctively, seeking the faintest pocket of warmth, and without waking fully you adjust your position, tucking them beneath a sibling's calves where heat lingers longest. The quilt responds to these small movements, its patched surface shifting and settling, redistributing warmth in slow, uneven waves. You can feel the different textures against your skin, rough wool here, softer linen there, a strip of fur sewn in long ago now worn thin but still precious. Each patch carries a history you barely remember, yet your body recognizes them all, knowing where warmth gathers and where cold tends to slip through. Sleep here is not passive, it is an ongoing act of maintenance. Your thoughts drift again, carried by the slow rhythm of breathing around you, and you become aware of how little silence truly exists. Even in these deepest hours, the hut hums softly with life, the faint rasp of breath through smoke-irritated lungs, the quiet grind of teeth as someone shifts, the low, steady sounds of animals settling deeper into straw. These noises no longer intrude on sleep. They form its foundation, a constant reassurance that nothing has gone wrong, that warmth and life still hold the center. At some point, a distant sound reaches you from outside, not sharp enough to alarm, just the muted crack of ice shifting somewhere in the forest, or perhaps the soft collapse of snow from a branch. It blends easily into the night's chorus, acknowledged without fear, because winter carries many voices, and only a few demand attention. You have learned to listen without waking fully, to catalogue sounds by instinct, deciding which matter and which can be allowed to fade. The fire remains hidden beneath its ash, but its presence is felt, a subtle warmth that radiates outward slowly, patiently, like a promise kept just barely. You trust it without seeing it, the way you trust the hut to hold, the roof to bear the snow, the people beside you to remain where they are. Trust here is not belief, it is habit formed by repetition, by nights that ended in morning, often enough to quiet doubt. Sleep deepens again. Not suddenly, but gradually, awareness narrowing until only sensation remains. The pressure of bodies, the weight of the quilt, the dull ache of cold held at bay, these become the entire world, and thoughts dissolve into them. Dreams, if they come, are faint and fragmented, impressions rather than stories, warmth without images, movement without meaning. Somewhere in this half-sleep, you sense time passing not by hours but by changes in the body, by the way muscles loosen and tighten, by the way breath slows and then deepens again. This is how the night moves here, not forward but inward, folding over itself until waking and sleeping are no longer distinct states, but part of the same quiet endurance. The hut remains still, the animals remain calm, the cold remains outside, pressing and waiting, and you drift with the rhythm of it all, carried gently through another stretch of darkness, knowing without thinking that this is how the night will continue for a long while yet, steady and unresolved, holding you in its slow, unbroken grip, as winter keeps its patient watch. Somewhere deep within the night, when the fire's warmth has settled into a low, steady memory, rather than a presence you actively feel, your body reaches that quiet threshold where fatigue outweighs discomfort and awareness narrows to the most basic sensations. You are dimly conscious of the quilt pressing down, of the straw beneath you yielding and then resisting, of the steady rise and fall of breath around you. And it is in this narrowing of attention that true medieval sleep takes hold, not as escape, but as suspension. The cold remains, but it no longer feels sharp. It has become a dull, constant pressure, like the weight of winter itself resting against your bones. Your body adapts by growing still, conserving what little warmth it holds, and even your thoughts slow, stretching out, becoming fewer and farther between. This is the kind of rest that does not refresh so much as preserve, holding the body together through the long hours until light returns. The hut seems to contract slightly as the temperature drops further outside, wood tightening, gaps narrowing, and the air inside growing heavier with smoke and breath. You sense this change without waking fully, a subtle shift that tells you the cold has deepened, that dawn is still far away. Someone nearby sighs in their sleep, a long exhale that fogs the darkness for a moment before disappearing, and you follow the sound back into stillness. Your mind drifts through fragments of memory, not forming full images, but sensations. The feel of sun-warmed earth in summer, the sound of insects at night, the smell of fresh-cut grass, all things distant now, yet remembered without longing, as though they belong to another version of you who lives in another season. Winter does this, not by erasing other times, but by setting them aside, asking you to focus only on what is immediately necessary. A faint crackle from the hearth reaches you, not flame but the quiet settling of ash, and the sound reassures you more than light ever could. The embers are still there, still breathing, still holding the promise of warmth for morning, and that knowledge allows your body to loosen just a little more. In a world where so much is uncertain, the survival of the fire through the night feels like a small, private victory. The animals remain calm, their warmth steady, their breathing slow, and you register their presence the way one registers the ground beneath their feet, without thought, without question. They are part of the structure of the night now, as essential as the walls or the roof, and their quiet endurance mirrors your own. Sleep deepens again, not suddenly, but like a tide creeping in, covering edges, smoothing sharpness, leaving only the central sensation of warmth held and cold kept at bay. You are no longer aware of how long you have been lying here, or how long remains until dawn, because time has loosened its grip, replaced by rhythm, by repetition, by the steady agreement between body and environment to continue. The hut holds, The night continues, and you drift within it, carried not toward an ending, but through an ongoing passage, one night among many, each blending into the next, each teaching the same quiet lesson of patience, closeness, and survival, as winter stretches on beyond the walls, waiting, unhurried, for its turn to be answered again. At some indistinct point in the night, when sleep has grown deep enough to blur thought, but not so deep that the world disappears entirely, you become aware of how the hut itself seems to settle into rest alongside you, as though wood and straw and earth have learned their own version of sleep. The timbers no longer creak as sharply, the roof no longer sighs beneath the snow, and even the draughts soften, slipping through gaps with less insistence, as if winter has paused its probing for a brief while. Your body remains curled inward, conserving warmth without conscious effort, and you notice how little you move now compared to earlier hours. The small adjustments, the constant shifting to chase heat, have slowed, replaced by stillness born not of comfort but of efficiency. Muscles that once resisted the cold now hold their position, and the ache that lingers in joints becomes background, something acknowledged but no longer examined. Breath around you has fallen into a deeper rhythm, longer pauses between inhalations, quieter exhalations that barely disturb the smoky air. The combined breathing of everyone in the hut creates a gentle rise and fall, like the slow movement of a single sleeping creature, and in this shared cadence individuality fades further. You are aware of yourself less as a separate body and more as a part of this breathing mass, bound together by warmth and necessity. A dream drifts through you, shallow and fleeting, not a story but a sensation, the feeling of standing near a fire on a cold day, hands extended, palms tingling as warmth returns slowly to numb skin. There are no faces, no words, only the relief of heat spreading inward, and even this simple image dissolves quickly, replaced by the steady pressure of the quilt and the familiar scent of smoke. Dreams here do not linger. They pass like breath, leaving only faint traces. The fire remains banked and unseen, yet its influence is felt in the way the cold does not fully claim the center of the hut. You trust this unseen presence completely, the way you trust the roof above you or the earth beneath you, not because you have examined it, but because it has held often enough before. Trust here is built from repetition, not reassurance. Somewhere outside, the night continues its slow movement, stars shifting behind clouds, snow settling grain by grain, but inside, the world feels enclosed and complete. There is nothing more to be done until morning, no action that would improve the situation, and this acceptance brings its own kind of calm. Winter nights teach patience not as virtue but as necessity. As sleep deepens again, awareness narrows further, and even the cold seems distant now, dulled by fatigue and familiarity. You are still aware, at the faintest level, that dawn will eventually come, that the fire will be stirred, that bodies will separate and the day will begin again. But these thoughts carry no urgency. For now the night holds, the hut holds, and you drift within that holding, carried quietly onward through another stretch of darkness, without resolution, without end, only continuation. The night stretches on with a kind of quiet confidence, as though it knows it has nothing to prove, and you drift within it, barely aware of where your body ends and the shared warmth begins. The quilt feels heavier now, not because it has gained weight, but because your muscles have finally stopped resisting it, allowing the fabric to press you gently into the straw and hold you there. Even the itch of wool has faded into the background, dulled by exhaustion and familiarity, leaving only the steady presence of warmth where bodies touch. The air in the hut feels thicker than before, saturated with breath and smoke, and when you inhale, it is shallow and careful, your body instinctively guarding heat. Each exhale escapes slowly, rising only a short distance before dissolving into the dark, and you sense how many breaths like this have filled spaces, like this one across generations, unseen but essential, forming a quiet continuity that binds nights together across time. A subtle shift passes through the hut as someone nearby rolls onto their other side, and the warmth rearranges itself once more, flowing toward the new shape, filling the space left behind. You respond without waking, drawing closer, sealing the gap, maintaining the balance, because even in sleep the body understands its role in the shared effort. There is no frustration in this, no irritation, only the calm efficiency of habit. Outside, the snow continues to settle, layer upon layer, smoothing the world into something simpler and quieter. Sound travels poorly through it now, and whatever moves beyond the walls does so unheard, leaving the hut suspended in its own small pocket of life. You feel sheltered not because the walls are strong, but because everything beyond them has been softened, slowed, made distant by winter itself. The animals remain deeply still, their warmth steady and reliable, and you sense them more than hear them, like anchors holding the night in place. Their presence reassures you that nothing has changed, that no sudden danger has approached, and that the fragile order of the hut remains intact. In a world governed by small signs, this steadiness matters more than certainty. Your thoughts drift briefly, touching the idea of morning without fully engaging it, and then slip away again because anticipation costs energy, and winter teaches you not to spend what you do not need to. For now, there is only this moment, this balance of warmth and cold, of breath and stillness, of endurance without effort. Sleep deepens once more, awareness thinning until it is little more than sensation, and even sensation begins to fade, leaving only the most basic rhythm beneath everything else. The hut holds, the night holds, and you are carried quietly forward, still within the same unbroken passage, still without an ending, as winter continues to wait beyond the walls and the slow, patient work of surviving another night goes on. Gradually, without any clear boundary, your awareness thins even further, as though sleep itself has begun to smooth the edges of thought, rounding everything into something softer and less defined. The hut no longer feels like a structure around you, but like an extension of your own body, its walls breathing when you breathe, its stillness deepening as you settle deeper into rest. Even the cold seems to have changed character, no longer sharp or probing, but distant and patient, waiting beyond layers of wood, snow, cloth, and flesh. Your limbs feel heavy now, not stiff, but weighted in a way that makes movement unnecessary. The straw beneath you has molded completely to your shape, and though you know it is uneven and unforgiving, your body has accepted it as stable ground. This acceptance is not comfort in the modern sense, but it is enough, a quiet agreement between exhaustion and necessity. Breath moves slowly through you, each inhale shallow and measured, each exhale releasing warmth carefully into the shared air. You are dimly aware that this breath adds to the warmth of the hut just as the warmth of others sustains you in return. A silent exchange that never stops, even when thought does. Sleep here is collective, not private. A shared drifting that binds everyone together through the long hours of darkness. The sounds that once drew your attention have faded into a low, indistinct hum, no longer separate enough to identify. Snoring, breathing, the faint settling of ash, the distant weight of snow against the roof all blend into a single background presence, steady and predictable. Nothing new announces itself, and that absence of change allows your mind to loosen its grip completely. For a moment, a memory surfaces of waking at dawn on nights like this, of the pale grey light slipping through cracks in the walls, of bodies slowly untangling, of cold rushing back the instant warmth breaks apart. The thought flickers and fades before it can sharpen, because dawn is not here yet, and the night still claims you fully. Your body sinks further into stillness, conserving warmth with an efficiency learned over countless winters. Even discomfort loses its edge, transformed into something neutral, something that no longer demands response. This is the deepest kind of rest available here, not restorative, but sustaining, a quiet holding pattern that carries you forward without effort. The hut remains unchanged, the fire steady beneath ash, the snow settled, the animals calm, and you drift on within this balance, suspended in a night that has no urgency and no end yet in sight, resting not because everything is safe, but because for now it is enough, and winter has been held at bay for another stretch of darkness. The night no longer feels like something you are moving through, but something that has closed gently around you, holding you in place the way deep water holds a body once it stops struggling. Your thoughts surface only occasionally now, slow and indistinct, more like sensations than ideas, and when they do appear, they dissolve almost immediately back into warmth and shadow. This is the quiet center of the night, the part that rarely leaves memory because it carries no drama, only persistence. You become faintly aware of how your heartbeat has slowed, steady and deliberate, as though your body understands that speed wastes warmth and calm preserves it. Each beat feels heavier, deeper, echoing softly inside your chest, and in that rhythm you sense the same patience that governs everything else in the hut. Nothing rushes here, not breath, not sleep, not even the cold waiting outside. The quilt presses more firmly now, not because anyone has pulled it tighter, but because bodies have settled fully into one another, creating a seal that keeps warmth from escaping. The edges of the blanket feel distant, irrelevant, while the center where you lie feels insulated and still. Somewhere near your shoulder, a sibling shifts slightly and then relaxes again, their warmth spreading slowly, deliberately, like heat moving through stone. The air inside the hut has grown very still, the smoke no longer drifting but hanging quietly, softened by time. You breathe it in without thought, your lungs accustomed to its presence, your body no longer reacting. What once would have felt heavy or irritating now feels neutral, part of the background of existence. And this adaptation feels almost like a small triumph, though you would never name it as such. Outside, the world remains locked in cold, but you sense it only distantly now, as pressure rather than threat. Snow has finished falling and rests against the walls, muffling everything beyond, turning the village into a sealed pocket of quiet. Even the idea of wolves, of storms, of danger fades, not because they are gone, but because your body no longer has the energy to imagine them. Sleep settles deeper still, blurring the boundary between awareness and rest, until even the act of breathing feels automatic, distant, as though it belongs to someone else. You are no longer waiting for morning, no longer marking time, no longer measuring comfort or discomfort. You are simply existing within the night, held by the shared warmth of bodies, the patience of fire beneath ash, and the fragile strength of a hut that has done this before and will do it again. And so the night continues, unbroken and unresolved, carrying you quietly forward, deeper into rest, deeper into stillness, as winter waits outside and survival remains. For now, gently intact. Time loses its shape entirely now, dissolving into a soft, featureless stretch where moments are no longer counted but felt, and you exist within the night rather than passing through it. Your body feels distant, not numb but quiet, as though sensation has been turned down to its lowest setting, leaving only the essentials behind. Warmth remains at the center, cold held respectfully at the edges, and the balance between them feels stable enough that your mind finally stops checking it. The hut seems to breathe with you, expanding and contracting in a rhythm so subtle you might miss it if you were fully awake. The timbers no longer complain, the roof no longer shifts, and the snow outside presses close like a second wall, insulating sound and movement, until the world feels reduced to this single enclosed space. You are aware dimly that this stillness is temporary, that winter rarely rests for long, but the thought carries no urgency now. Someone nearby dreams deeply and exhales a long, contented sigh, the sound spreading through the quilt like a ripple through water, briefly disturbing the warmth before it settles again. You respond instinctively, drawing closer, sealing the gap, restoring the quiet equilibrium without ever opening your eyes. This unspoken coordination has been learned over countless nights, practiced without instruction, perfected through repetition. The animals remain steady, their warmth constant, their presence grounding. Even without seeing them, you know exactly where they are. The pig curled near the hearth, the goat tethered just beyond the edge of the bedding, the hens tucked above, each one part of the invisible structure that holds the night together. Their stillness tells you that nothing threatens, that the night has not shifted in any dangerous way. Your thoughts wander once more, slow and indistinct, brushing against the idea of morning chores, of fire stirred and bread warmed, of bodies separating reluctantly from shared heat. But these images fade before they fully form. Anticipation belongs to daylight. The night asks only that you remain, that you conserve, that you endure quietly. Sleep thickens again, not drawing you downward, but smoothing you outward, spreading you thin across the shared warmth, until individuality feels unimportant. You are part of the quilt now, part of the straw, part of the breathing hut itself, and this sense of belonging carries a deep, steady calm. The fire continues to hold beneath its ash, patient and unseen. The snow remains pressed against the walls, silent and heavy, and the night moves forward at its own slow pace. You drift within it, neither fully asleep nor awake, sustained by closeness, habit, and the quiet agreement between all living things here to last until light returns, whenever that may be. The deepest part of the night arrives without announcement, settling over the hut like a final layer of snow, and in this depth even awareness feels padded and distant. Softened the way sound is softened by heavy drifts. You are barely conscious now of your own form, only of pressure and warmth, and the faint certainty that you are still here, still breathing, still held within this shared shelter. The cold exists only as an idea, something remembered rather than felt, kept at a respectful distance by the combined presence of bodies and fire. Your breathing has slowed to a steady, economical rhythm, each inhale brief, each exhale carefully released, as though your body has learned exactly how much warmth it can afford to lose. This restraint feels natural now, no longer something you think about, and the calm it brings seeps into your muscles, allowing them to loosen without fully relaxing. True comfort may be absent, but stability has taken its place, and that is enough. The hut itself seems almost motionless, its earlier creaks and sighs gone, replaced by a quiet so complete it feels intentional. Snow pressed against the walls absorbs what little sound remains, turning the world outside into something distant and unreal, while inside, the air feels enclosed and safe, thick with breath and memory. You sense how rare this stillness is, how it marks the night's lowest point, the moment before everything begins to shift again toward morning. A faint warmth brushes your side as someone nearby adjusts in their sleep, and without waking you respond, shifting just enough to maintain contact, preserving the fragile circle that holds the cold at bay. These movements are small and precise, practiced over many winters, and they happen without thought, guided by instinct rather than intention. Even asleep, the body remembers what it must do. The fire remains hidden, its presence felt only as a gentle absence of cold at the hut's center, and you trust it completely, knowing that it will still be there when needed. Trust like this is quiet and unexamined, built not from hope but from repetition, from nights that ended in dawn often enough to make doubt unnecessary. Sleep now wraps you fully, not as darkness but as depth, a state where time dissolves and the world narrows to the simplest truth of warmth held and cold resisted. You are no longer waiting, no longer listening, no longer adjusting. You are resting in the only way this place allows, suspended between night and morning, between endurance and release. The hut holds, the snow holds, the fire holds, and you remain within that holding, carry gently onward through the last, deepest stretch of night, still without ending, still unresolved, as winter keeps its quiet watch beyond the walls, and survival continues, breath by breath, through the dark. Very slowly, almost without realizing it, the night begins to loosen its grip, not breaking, not retreating, but thinning in the quietest possible way, like breath easing from clenched lungs. You do not wake to light at first, only to a subtle change in the air, a sense that the darkness is no longer pressing inward, that the cold has paused its patient advance. The hut still holds you, the quilt still weighs heavy, bodies still lie close, but something has shifted, something gentle and unmistakable, the promise of morning approaching without sound. Your breath deepens before your thoughts do, warming the space beneath the blanket, and you feel stiffness settle into your limbs, the dull ache of joints reminding you that rest here is never soft, only sufficient. Around you, others begin to stir in the same quiet way, small movements rippling through the shared warmth. A sigh here, a stretch there, the careful testing of fingers and toes before they dare leave the shelter of cloth and bodies. The embers beneath the ash glow faintly as your father rises, moving slowly so as not to wake everyone at once, kneeling by the hearth to uncover the fire's hidden heart. When air reaches it, the coals answer immediately, a soft bloom of orange spreading through grey, and with it comes the familiar scent of smoke renewed, sharper now, brighter, alive. The hut responds as it always does, shadows shifting, breath fogging less, warmth beginning its slow return to dominance. Light seeps in next, thin and pale, slipping through cracks in the walls and the edge of the door, not yet daylight, but enough to reveal shapes, faces, the quiet disorder of bodies and straw and blankets. Snow outside reflects what little brightness exists, lending the hut a muted glow, and for a moment everything feels suspended between night and day, neither fully claimed by sleep, nor yet demanded by work. Bodies separate reluctantly, warmth breaking apart in stages, each movement allowing cold to rush briefly into places it was held at bay all night. Children groan softly, adults straighten with effort, animals shift and stretch, readying themselves for another day of endurance. The shared bed dissolves back into individuals, but the closeness lingers in the air, in memory, in the steady certainty that no one faced the night alone. You sit up at last, wrapped in wool and smoke, eyes heavy but open, aware not of comfort, but of survival accomplished. Another winter night has passed inside a wooden hut, not conquered, not softened, but endured through closeness, habit, and patience. This is how people slept through brutal medieval winters, not by escaping the cold, but by living carefully within it, by gathering warmth wherever it could be found, by trusting fire, bodies, and routine to carry them through the dark. As the fire grows stronger, and the day slowly claims the hut, you carry the night with you, its lessons woven into muscle and memory, knowing that when darkness falls again, you will return to the same rituals, the same shared warmth, the same quiet agreement to last until morning, because here, sleep is not a luxury, but a form of survival, and survival itself is something learned one long winter night at a time.